For the last 6 weeks, I've been taking pictures on this old 35mm film camera, and today we finally got them developed, so we're going to look through and see how they turned out. Right, so the setup that we've got here, we've got the pictures here. I've written down what aperture and shutter speeds, just so I know roughly where we're at and what I could improve on next time. And I've just got a few notes with each picture as to what I do and don't like about them. And we're starting off strong here, guys, because this one is well out of focus. Obviously, it's my first picture. I was probably a bit too focused on getting the right shutter speed and making sure the needles all match up. And obviously forgot to put it in focus or just wasn't used to it. So unfortunately for that one, that is out of focus. And what I'll compare it to with the next one is the black value. What I mean by the black value is you can see quite clearly with Jet's hair that it's very dark in comparison to the background. Whereas with this second picture here, you can see so much more definition or so much more contrast between the background and the subject. So it's much easier to distinguish. And not only that, you can start seeing way more detail in the hair. It's easier to pick up. So for me, this first picture here is too dark. The exposure is good enough because obviously his face is quite white. And I don't know, is that because of if I have the light too close? Right, the third picture we have is just a picture of Fez and Jacob working. I generally quite like this picture. Francis is in focus quite nicely. Jacob, unfortunately, is a little bit blurry. It's nothing too crazy though. I probably could have gone with a slightly wider aperture, but I think all the color values and exposure levels are all pretty good for this one. Moving on, unfortunately for Jordan, I caught him blinking. That's just something you won't know until you get these pictures developed. It's nothing too major. It's obviously just as he was blinking, which is quite funny and a little bit annoying. But other than that, I think the black value is pretty decent. You can obviously see a good amount of detail in the hair and there's enough contrast in the back. I personally really like this picture. It's a picture of Archie cutting his mate's hair. So why do I like it so much? It's quite a white, bright picture. Archie obviously contrasts that quite nicely with his dark shirt. I think it's a generally good action shot. It's well lit up. You can see exactly what's going on. It's a very clear picture from the get-go. Anything I don't like about it, and it's just a minor detail, it's just the bin in the background, and that's just there, so you can't really avoid that too much. But yeah, really like that picture. It turned out quite nicely. We've got two pictures here. I don't know why I decided to take two pictures. They're pretty much the same. In this first one here, not a massive fan of it. The framing isn't great. Jacob's kind of just about in the picture there. Unfortunately with the client here, can't see the silhouette too much because of the towel warmer in the back. Obviously it's black on black, so you can't see a good silhouette of the haircut. Apart from that, the lighting's generally all right. The exposure's all pretty good. The next one was, I think, better framed up there. They're more centralized. Quite like where the Gallery X banner finishes, and obviously you've got the plants here. Unfortunately, just for that black towel warmer, it just doesn't really work. The image doesn't really pop. So this is tin. What do I really like about this? The lighting, the exposure, everything is just very readable. I like the detail in the hair. You can see everything. I think the framing and composition is just really nice. As an image, as a standalone image, you know exactly what it is. There's no sort of confusion. He is the main subject. Everything else is blurred out quite nicely around him. This one's a bit of a failure. This is Jacob cleaning the window with his RS4 in the back. I think the problem is with this, the backlight coming through, or the natural daylight coming through, is acting as such a backlight that you can't see Jacob or what he's doing really. It makes it a bit of an unclear image. And unfortunately with the RS4, nice looking car. It's cut off quite a lot with obviously the plant pot, the framing of the door and the window. You can't really see too much of what's going on in this picture. Not a great picture. This one was just taken just as a bit of a joke. I think we were just packing up for the day and leaving. Funnily enough, you can really see it in Fez's face. It takes such a long time to set this camera up. He's kind of stood there like, what the fuck's going on? Something I picked up as well, the exposure. Obviously Fez is naturally a bit dark. He's got a darker skin tone. I'd say he's perfectly exposed, whereas you look at Jacob and Archie and they're a little bit overexposed. You can really see it in Archie's bicep. because it just fades into the wall. So I had quite a big open aperture for this, because there's nothing too blurry or out of focus. There's no depth of field really to it. This one, I never actually got his name. He came in and quite long hair, and he just wanted to just buzz it all off. So it was quite a cool transformation. I should have really got a picture before. But yeah, he asked me to put this line in. I think in this black and white picture, the contrast really makes it pop. I think the picture's slightly out of focus. You can see here with the actual line itself, it's not that crisp, it's a bit fuzzy. But whereas his hair is very much so in focus, and his face is very well in focus, this part of his head is just a little bit out of focus, and that's kind of the main piece. But as an overall picture, you can quite clearly see what it's about. The background's quite nicely blurred out. Right, moving on, what have we got next? Jacob training up Dan on the mannequin's head. I think this has great composition. It's a good action shot. You can clearly see what's happening in the picture. One downside to it is obviously the lighting. So we have a lot of lighting coming from the ceiling up above. So that means whenever you're taking a picture from below, which I was quite a bit low, you're taking a picture from below, you've got quite a lot of backlight and no light actually really hitting the face. And because they're looking down, the face gets darkened off quite a bit. It looks a bit better digitally than it does actually in this picture here. You can see a little bit more. But I think still a good picture. You can clearly see what's going on. Aperture of 8, so it's quite open, and then 60. What could I have done different next time? I think just lighting on that one. I think the aperture and the shutter speed are pretty good, and I think the only thing that really lets this picture down is just the lighting. And I maybe should get a flash for this camera, just so it picks up those extra details, or just makes those subjects a bit more lit up. We've got just another picture of Jacob and Fez cutting hair. This one's okay. There's obviously a lot of backlight coming through the window. Unfortunately with that, Jacob and his client are fairly dark, and that's just because we have no lights in that corner. All the lighting comes from up above and comes naturally from the window. So with the result of that, Jacob and his client are quite dark. Fez is just over here doing his thing. That's lit up all right. There's not much happening in this picture. Moving on to Dan here. So this was a bit of a creative haircut. This first picture, I did pick up that it was it slightly out of focus? His hair is slightly out of focus. Looking at it as an image, fairly well lit up. It's a little bit dark, especially in the actual physical picture itself. So maybe a slightly better lighting choice would have helped that a little bit more. Other than that, the general silhouette of it is quite nice. I like his little bit of hair coming down here. And then the other picture of Dan, so we just took a second picture with him. And the only thing I really changed was the aperture. Oh, and the shutter speed actually. So completely different aperture and completely different shutter speed. And I find what's interesting with this, so the black value on this first picture is quite dark. You start losing a bit of the detail in the hair, whereas you can see a lot more detail in the hair here. I personally really like this picture. I think it would have been nice if me and Archie weren't in the background there, but I had a mirror in front, so that's going to happen naturally. Yeah, very happy with how that turned out, more so in the detail in the hair, how light it is, how well exposed it is, and just the general contrast silhouette just pops quite nicely. So unfortunately for this one, it's a good picture. You can see kind of exactly what's going on. Interesting, looks quite different from the picture here to the picture here. But what I noticed with this, and it's how dark it is, you cannot see any texture or any detail in the hair at all. So that's a little bit annoying, but generally a good silhouette. I took this from a slightly lower angle, so you can start seeing the hex lights in, which I think adds a really cool dimension to the picture. Where did I get? So that was a 2.5 with 250. So what could I have done to make that more detailed? Obviously you need to let in more light, but there's obviously a lot of light coming in from the ceiling, so I'd maybe dropping down to 125 shutter speed would have let in a bit more light, and with that a little bit more detail through the hair. Oh, this one is actually, this is Kate, Grace and Josh at Connie's 30th birthday. Don't know why I just got the camera out and decided to take a picture. Was thinking about excluding this, but I thought it's the same principle. We're just going through pictures and seeing what the different effects are with the different settings. So these are two very similar pictures. I think the only thing I really changed was just a little bit of the aperture, because I found this one was the first one. Obviously Grace and Josh are a little bit blurred. So I opened up the aperture for the second one and they're a bit more in focus. Unfortunately with that, Grace is blinking. But still pretty cute picture, kind of nice. let's have a look at this one. So this one is Archie cutting his brother's hair. Unfortunately for this, not a great picture. You can see that his brother's hair is quite dark. You can't see any sort of like definition in the hair. It's exposed enough, but obviously again, suffering with not enough light in that corner. I made a pretty poor choice on the composition of it. Obviously Archie's all the way over here, kind of out of frame, and his client is all the way over here, and there's just not much happening in this space. So it's a pretty empty picture. I think the action of what Archie's doing is pretty cool. I think maybe if I were to retake this picture, I'd be a bit more in front of the client and Archie, just so I can get them sort of aligned into one. But we live and learn. So unfortunately with this one, I think this one is actually a really good picture. This one is Jacob cutting with Dan watching. Why is it unfortunate? I don't know what happened. I don't know if I can get that retouched up or redeveloped, but unfortunately there's just a black line through Dan. Apart from that, the composition, the lighting, the exposure, you can very clearly read what's going on in this picture. You can see the detail enough in the hair. Jacob's face is well exposed and in detail, so is his client, so the aperture I must have had it quite wide. Oh no, I had it at 2.8. Oh, interesting. So I had the aperture at 2.8. Which is obviously quite low, and surprisingly actually Dan's not too blurred, Jacob isn't too blurred. You can clearly read what's going on. Just really unfortunate that in the developing process there's just a huge black line through Dan's face. It's better in the digital than it is the actual picture, because that really blackens his face out, but that's what it is. So this next picture of Adam I really like this picture. It turned out really nice, and as a bonus, it was just before he really messed his face up. Unfortunately, he dove into the baths and hit the ground and did a lot of damage to his face. So it's good that we actually got a decent picture of him before he really messed his face up. But with that being said, this picture I think is perfectly exposed, perfectly lit up. You can clearly read what's going on. Great disconnection between the background and the foreground. So you can see this perfect silhouette of his hair. Yeah, everything about that just really, really nice. Maybe, I think one thing I'm gonna try and do with the camera next time is get a little bit closer into people's faces so it's framed up a little bit closer. But that being said, still really nice picture. So interestingly with these two pictures actually, so Adam and Killian were at the same time, very similar lighting. The only thing I did change is I shot Adam with a 1.4 at 500 shutter speed, and I shot Killian at a aperture of 2 down to 250. So we'll put Adam there for one side and we'll move on to Killian. But this again, really cool angle. So I actually got up on a chair and I was just shooting him from up above. It looked really stupid what I was doing. But the reason I did that was to kind of capture more of the texture going through his hair. And I think the slower shutter speed has allowed me to capture more of that detail in the hair. So I think one thing I'm finding with high shutter speed is obviously darkening the hair off quite a lot, and the slower shutter speed is allowing more detail in the hair. So yeah, really cool picture, really like them both, turned out really nice. Try and get more of those in the future. This next one, Hayden. I'm impartial to this one. It's a cool silhouette. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but the black level of his hair is just a bit sort of faded. You can't really see too much detail in his hair. Nothing really pops too much about this picture. It's quite a sort of washed over picture. And where did I shoot that at? That was a 1.4. Oh, 1.4 at 1,000. So I remember actually there was a lot of sunlight coming through, a lot of natural sunlight bouncing in, and maybe that's just overexposed his face quite a lot. But it seems to be just generally quite a grey picture. And again, you can't see too much definition or too much contrast between the foreground and the background. So it's a good enough picture, but it's not perfect. You know, I'd consider Adam and Killian here. They'd probably be my two best pictures. I love how they turned out. Just with the background, very well lit up, very white, which makes the foreground, the subject pop so much more. Unfortunately with Hayden, like, it's a good close-up picture and you can see a lot of detail in his face, but it just gets a bit washed out. Right, these next few pictures, these turned out very meh. When I took them, I thought they were really arty and I thought they were really cool. Unfortunately, can't read straight away what this picture's about. The chair is just so dark. Straight away, you're looking at the car, you're not really looking at the chair. That's not really the main subject of focus. I think it's kind of cool if you were to crop it in like that and just look at the chair and the light. That's kind of a cool image, but just not really doing it for me. Oh, saying that, talking about cropping it in. So I think that's what I did. I think I sort of just cropped it in a little bit, focused more on the chair and the light. And I think as a cool bonus, I realized I can get the Gallery X sign in the mirror, which I thought was a cool little thing to do. But as well, it kind of suffers from the chair not really being well lit up. There's no real point of focus in this picture. It's just kind of a bit bland, bit nothing going on, you know. Moving on, this was a completely different day and I had a similar idea, and I've got a video of it actually. I took a picture, I turned all the lights off, I left the ring light on by accident, and I thought the way it lit the chair up just looked really cool. I think on a digital picture on my iPhone, it turned out really well. Unfortunately, in the black and white picture here, the chair just gets lost. It's so dark, you can kind of see that it is a chair, but yeah, just unfortunately, it's just so black and washed out. Kind of a really cool artsy picture, but again, nothing really spectacular with it. Cool, right, moving on. This is another favorite of mine. This is Otis. That was at an aperture of 2 with a shutter speed of 500. So again, the highest shutter speed, you can kind of see it starts losing a little bit of detail in the hair. But I think generally it's worked out quite nicely. It's got a good contrast all around. You can make out the foreground and the background just about. I think if I was to start shooting a little bit higher, that's where it really starts darkening off the hair. And towel warmer in the back actually seems to be my biggest enemy there. The towel warmer and the sink, because they're black, they really break up the silhouette. So it'd be quite nice actually if they were just white. I'd just try and maybe shoot from a higher angle and try and get the white floor in. But yeah, anyway, with this picture, really nice silhouette, really nice image all round, turned out quite nice, cool haircut. Yeah, very happy with that. I think maybe what I would have done for next time is probably shot at a lower shutter speed. I'm still to figure out if the lower shutter speed lets in more, creates more detail in the hair, or if I just need to get the light a little bit closer to illuminate and lighten up that hair. Yeah, moving on, unfortunately with Mark, suffers from, where did I shoot this at? 500. So it's interesting how these two images are shot with the same shutter speed, but one of them suffers more so from black values being just too similar to the towel warmer and the sink. So unfortunately with Mark here, would have been a really cool image. Unfortunately we lost most of the detail in his hair, and it's kind of blended in with the towel warmer and the sink in the background. So you lose the silhouette straight away. His face is nicely exposed and well in detail. You can see the taper there is quite nice, but unfortunately the silhouette is lost. So that's a real shame, because it would have been quite a nice haircut. I really need to work on actually just bringing the camera up a bit higher or a bit lower, because unfortunately that towel warmer and that sink, they're just losing my images. Right, moving on next, we got Fez and Jacob working. Really like this picture. I've got a slightly wider aperture because Fez is well in focus, and also so is Jacob. It's not too blurry. You can see everything that's going on. Everything's very well exposed, very well lit, and yeah, just a really good image. Obviously you've got a bit of an action shot of them both cutting hair. I think I took this, and just before I obviously clicked the shutter, someone just walked in, so that's where you got Fez looking up. But I think that kind of adds to the image, makes you wonder what's going on in the picture. And then lastly, we've got Fez. So I was playing around with his hair, trying to do some different stuff. We ended up adding some sort of like white pencil to help really make his outline pop. So I think that worked really nicely. I really like actually as well his fringe just coming through and just flicking out a little bit there. I took it obviously from a slightly lower angle, and you can start seeing that hex light, which is quite a nice sort of like halo effect, if you like, actually. Again, the actual detail in his hair, if this was a really texturized haircut, I think it would have been a pretty poor image because you can't see anything of the hair. But that being said, the silhouette is quite nice. The main focus is the taper. So I think that works in that aspect. So yeah, that's all the pictures. I think it was very interesting kind of like going through that and seeing what some images suffered from and what others really sort of benefited from. He learned a lot, and I'm so glad that I've written down all the aperture and shutter speeds. I think what I'm going to do for next time is lower the shutter speed, and if that means opening up the aperture to compensate for that, I think I'm going to have to do that. And I'm really going to start playing around with different angles, trying to go a bit higher, a bit lower. And yeah, that's it really.